So I see we've got everyone's pictures, but if I could just welcome everyone with their videos on, and then we can prepare who's going to answer. I thought I would, if I could trouble this, yes, to put up the first few questions. I wanted to kind of group it and stay with Chiken's very nice framing of the house and stepping out of the house, and yet at the same time, you know, Robert, you mentioned the word atrophy, and I think that's the key, right? We want to encourage everyone, especially in this COVID period, not to be frozen in fear. We've heard very scary stories. Thank you, Eileen, and Carolyn has helped us to unpack them. But I think as we can hear from Jamil and Chiken, and Eileen also with your center, the SCAM center, there are steps that can be taken. So we have some questions that were sent in ahead of, together with the registration for today's webinar, and we want to be able to deal with them. Maybe if I could ask Carolyn, well, the phrasing of this question is, let's unpack it, right? How to recognize and manage scams that come out of the blue when you least expect it. Well, I don't know when you expect scam. So if we can put ourselves in that house again, right? And how can you, having heard from Carolyn, be aware of the things to be alert about? And I think the other one that maybe we can lump together with this is, there was the question, I've been receiving emails, which are obviously scam emails from DHL, credit cards, SingPost, which I have ignored and deleted. One even threatened harms if I didn't pay them Bitcoins. I've made a police report but was advised there's nothing the police could do. Could these people hack into my phone or PC and gain access to my bank accounts? And what safety measures could I take? Eileen, Carolyn, I suppose we can all preface that with saying everything depends on the facts of each case, right?
Yeah, I think really how to recognize and scams is really in the question itself, because the person has asked when I least expect it. I think when you least expect it, right, that is really the first alarm bell, you know. Yeah, so suddenly somebody calls you, you know, suddenly you get email from you know, some platform that you've never used, or suddenly, you know, you didn't use PayPal, but your PayPal account has problems, you know. These are all clear telltale signs. And so we would really recommend, as with all the other speakers, that if you see something that immediately gets you suspicious, or you think, why is this coming out of the blue? Then look at who is sending it to you and call the independent person. So if a bank is sending it to you, don't answer the email, call the bank that is involved. If you know, a platform is sending it to a shopping platform, then you know, separately email the platform, not from that same email, but you know, separately email the platform to ask. That would be the best way.
Yeah, and I think Eileen, if you've got something to add.
Yeah, I mean, IMDA has actually started the sharing on if you see a plus sign and you are not expecting any phone calls from overseas, right? You should ignore that phone call. So this is something, these are practical ways. And also earlier you also mentioned about somebody mentioned that, oh yeah, if you don't pay up or he doesn't pay up, then he gets threatened with splashing of pain, all those kind of harassment. The best way at the end of the day is really to ignore all this, because to send somebody to your house to splash pain, you need a lot of capital, a lot of money, a lot of resources. Nowadays, it's really very difficult to find harasser. And if you continue to ignore, that person will continue, you know, would have to get more resources to go and send more people to your house. And it's really a lot of money. So the point here is like that. Before my current post, I was also previously holding the post of head unlicensed money lending strike force that is with CID. So we learned that, you know, for victims, right, if whenever the let's say scammers or the loan sharks threaten to splash pain, right, and for victims that they pay up immediately, right, the loan sharks will continue to send people to the house to splash pain. Same applies for scammers. Some of these loan scammers, right, if you submit to them, they'll continue to send more people to your house as long as you know, you pay up. So sometimes your behavior drives more behavior, more harassment. So you just need to tahan all the way. Soon the scammers will give up on you. Yeah.
Tahan all the way.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
had
sure
a
that's a
victim.
strategy in itself. For Jamal's benefit, I think needs to grit and bear with it. Like,
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted
needed
to add,
that.
I had a victim also, with same problem, loan scam. Threatened harassment, splashing pain, send him videos of people splashing pain, and he paid. And then finally, he had no money to pay, and he really couldn't take it anymore. So he just said, okay, I'm just gonna grit my teeth and bear with this, and nothing happened. Yeah,
okay, that's
but he did
very,
report to
very
the police, which is the
encouraging.
correct thing to do. Yeah.
I think that, hearing some of these stories of the victims, there is an element of you're a victim in more than just losing money, right?
Yeah.
These are people who are victims. They are suffering from the atrophy, and yet we want, as Robert has reminded us, we want to be able to encourage them, because especially in this period of COVID, how can we use tech to enable people to continue with their lives, right? And I think we can hear from Jamil and Chikin here, because the banks have this together with MAS on the Pay Now platform. Some of the questions, maybe we can return to some of the questions here. Do you recommend not storing our credit cards with vendors like PayPal to prevent scams? If we're using overseas SIM cards when overseas, will we have issues using Pay Now? And what are the pitfalls to note when one does digital money transfer? So if I could, just ask Chicken to use your very valuable framework of the house, and maybe we just introduce more than the guard dog, but other people to stand around to remind everyone that you are not alone, right? You don't just have Eileen and her SWAT team. You have the banks, and you have, to be able to be transparent about your transactions.
Sure. So I'll take a shot at some of these questions, right? So I think this point, firstly, about not storing credit cards with vendors like PayPal. Okay. If we choose not to do certain things, then you're also excluding yourself from that channel of something that could actually become useful to you. So I think I would say something about it's not an absolute yes or an absolute no, right? The question is, we have to understand the risk that's associated with what we're doing and to try to protect ourselves against that risk, right? So if I keep on the analogy with the house, right? A way to kind of keep yourself super secure is kind of like to build a house on a mountain and never go out of your house, right? But while that avoids a lot of the risk, it doesn't give you the benefit of being in a community, going out shopping and that kind of stuff.
That might be the Tahan strategy, right?
Yeah, or the tahan and bury all the way. Yeah. So I think, let me just speak a little bit personally now. Actually, I have a very low limit credit card that I use on online transfers. And actually, because the risk is limited, because the limit is low, I know that even if that card is lost, I know that the maximum downside is not that big. And then I have another card which I use for slightly larger payments. And I do make a distinction between the two. And so I think it is a question of making those types of risk decisions as to what you have appetite for, what you don't have appetite for. I specifically said some of us may choose to use wallets because you don't want direct access to the bank account. Some of us don't. And I think these are all things that as we educate ourselves more, we can figure out what is right for us. Some people are quite happy to leave their door open because they live in a community, that could be gated, or they in a condominium where they have security. And I think because of that, they leave their door unlocked. And I think that's part of the decision making. I'm going to yield the time to some other people, but I'd like to make one point here around just the point around overseas SIM card, right? Actually, we try to do two things, right? We try to authenticate the device, and then we try to authenticate you. Okay, so we're not actually looking for your phone number. We're trying to look at, is this the device on which you have interacted with us in the past? Not really your phone number. Yeah, and then we're trying to check that that's correct, and then the credentials that we're using to authenticate you, is that the credentials that we're used to. Then we got those matches with whatever security that the banks do. Actually, most people do this. If we get that, then the transaction will pass. And that's why I'm emphasizing so much, don't give out your credentials, don't give out your OTP, don't give out your password. That is extremely unusual. We don't ask for that. Okay, I've spoken too much. I should hand the time over to
No, not
colleagues.
at all. But
Actually, Chicken, I think your analogy of the house and storing of the credit cards online is actually a very simple way of saying, how many people do you give your house key to?
Yeah.
Do you give your house key to the postman so that he can bring the mail into your house? Do you give your house key to the laundromat so that they can deliver the laundry all the way into your front door? Now, there may be some trusted services where you are prepared to give your house key to a third party, but those better be services that you trust.
Yep.
And I think the problem you have is your cyber hygiene is not just the hygiene you maintain with the bank, but it's also the hygiene you maintain with each of those people you trust with those services. So you gave a situation at the beginning, 10-digit password with the bank, very nice and secure. But if you then put your cards with an online platform or online service provider, and you have a 4-digit password with that service provider, or that service provider doesn't have OTP or 2FA, you're actually just lowering your threshold across the board.
Yep. And sorry, I'm super passionate now about that point that was made, right? So as a society, as we evolve, right, into the digital economy and that kind of stuff, and as we benefit as a society from that, the philosophical point is, we've got to kind of like compensate for whatever is coming, or mitigate the risk impact of what we're doing by kind of developing these psychological defenses, cyber hygiene defenses, and so on and so forth. And one last rider would be that, actually it's for your household. Because once you have one computer that is compromised, actually it affects all the activity on that computer. So it is incumbent on us to educate our parents, our children, the people who share the devices with us. Actually, all of us need to maintain a certain level of capability. It's a journey. I think it's something that we will all evolve into, but that's the way we move forward into the future with boldness.
Yes, I think that it's a very useful time also to ask Jamil for your last slide, right? Remember you had a checklist, and maybe if we could combine those two infographics that Chikin and Jamil have shared with us. I mean, I think if Chikin, you've mentioned the philosophical level, really we're talking about it, but typically, I think from what Eileen and Carolyn have shared, the victims might not be thinking about it. So it's very useful and give them this framework and think about the house, who are you letting in this time of everyone's got cabin fever. The checklist that Jamil you have, a checklist is very effective. And before maybe it's useful for them to put it up on the computer before they share anything, or before they save the password and save these account details. They have the checklist in mind. Jamil?
Yeah, no, just to re-emphasize things, I think there are some, the rationale behind the checklist was just to really sort of emphasize some really basic rules that are going to be very powerful in terms of protecting us from fraud. And I think the two things on that I'd really want to emphasize again is to have these as red lines in your mind. You should, things should be going off in terms of a huge warning, as a siren, whatever analogy you want to give, that there's no circumstance an individual will be asking for a legitimate call or anyone would be asking for an OTP. So the minute that happens, if everyone takes one thing away, is to put the phone down, or just not to respond to that, because that is a very clear indication that it is a scam. So, if you take that one thing away, then I think, we'll all sort of take a step forward, I would say, in terms of protecting us from fraudsters. Another aspect that, again, really simple, is just to really do some independent validation. I know that sounds complicated, but really what we're just saying is go onto Google, do a search do a search for MOH's number or whoever's number, and use that number to call. Very straightforward. We use it, day in our daily lives for many things. It's as simple as that. And if we can establish these good practices, then it really will be a very good first line of defense to protect ourselves from fraud and scams.
Thanks, Jamil. And if Robert and Eileen, if I could just alert you, because I've asked for one of these questions, I think it reflects a lot of the questions that we've been getting, this mindset about, you can imagine someone's now having heard all these stories and probably been a victim also, asking, a lot of these apps are now installed on my mobile phone. What happens if I lost my mobile? And I think Chicken, just now you made this point that, we look at authenticating the device, right? And this is the device, right? So what if I've lost my device? Will my apps be hacked and my money stolen? Eileen, Robert, Chicken?
I think the first thing on this is really back down to the very original cyber hygiene. Does your device have a passcode? And a lot of people, it's back to Chicken's analogy. Does your house have a lock? If you have not put a passcode on your phone, if you do not protect your device and you lose it, it's effectively leaving your house door unlocked so that anybody who comes by who can pick it up can just walk in. I think the first thing is your device locked? And I think a lot of people, for whatever reasons, convenience, their children use their devices, their children play on their phones, they leave their devices unlocked. You're just basically leaving your house unlocked. So the first thing is your device unlocked? And then the next question is, have you locked it securely enough? 0000 is not a good password. 1111 is not a good password.
Dear.
I think, so again, that's down to the basic hygiene. Thereafter, a lot of devices, if you put the passwords in incorrectly after a number of tries, the device will lock itself. So somebody who gets hold of the device may not be able to get into it. But of course, if you've lost the device, the first thing you should do is really notify somebody and then change those passwords in those accounts that are associated with it. But again, your first line of defense, have a lock on your phone.
Great, thank you. Eileen, something to add?
Okay. I agree with what Robert has mentioned, that at the end of the day, it's your own personal hygiene. You just got to take care of your own self. Police cannot be everywhere all the time, and by the time we come in, most likely you would have lost all your money already. And if you were to come in, at the end of the day, is the recovery process, which if the money were to go overseas to an overseas bank, how usually we would not be able to recover it. But if
Eileen, on that point, right, there's a related question about, can't action be taken by the authorities to directly track scammers such as the Macau scam? As telcos should be able to provide details, but maybe you want to emphasize your point that once the money goes out.
Yeah. Actually, we have got some contacts with the Anti-Deception Coordination Center from Hong Kong. So sometimes the money that goes overseas, they are able to help us recover. But most of the time, that if the money were to go overseas, right, our chances of recovery is as close to zero, because at the end of the day, right, even if we are really keen to come in to help, the other authority may lack the resources to do so. So sometimes people also ask, you have got all the phone numbers, right? How come you cannot track down the scammers, right? So just on the 16th of August, about 2 Sundays ago, the Singapore was actually my center. We conducted an island-wide operation against 16 prepaid cards, all these errands handphone shops. What these handphone shops generally do is, when a foreigner come and register for a prepaid card, right, they will use their particulars to register for another 2 more. And then they will sell it to people who really want to buy under anonymous means. So that is one way that all these syndicates, or the underground syndicate scammers, unlicensed money lenders, how they circumvent the law by buying such prepaid cards. So we have started to do such enforcement. It is not just that we don't want to do, but we are also trying always. Then there are also, actually, as you all were talking, I was also going through some of the Facebook questions. For instance, somebody actually asked, and how did all these scammers got information of their handphone numbers? Well, in the course of my career, we have arrested people from telecommunication companies we have arrested bank staff who actually steal all this information and sell it to all these scammers or the criminals. So it is very common. And even if you sometimes participate in lucky draws, actually I also stopped participating in lucky draws already. Then you will key in a lot of your personal particulars. In the past, you used to key in your NRIC, your handphone number, your addresses. Actually, I just need to grab one handful of all those information. I can have about 20 targets already. So actually information is everywhere. It is sometimes difficult for us to stop, but what we really need to advocate is, actually, if you forget about everything, never mind, you just remember one thing, that is, don't give away your bank particulars as well as your OTP to anybody. Then that will be the first line of defense already.
Okay,
Yeah.
so no OTP, no bank particulars.
Yes.
Don't take part in lucky draws would not be
No.
encouragement, because I see a lot of, friends filling up at NTUC every week faithfully, I mean, even the Scouts Lucky Draw has full details of you.
Yeah. If I may add just one additional point, I want to strongly advocate what Chikin has shared earlier. In a lot of our cases, right, the scammers will take over their bank account because we provide, the victims actually provided them with their bank particulars or the OTP. At the end of the day, I would strongly advocate that you don't put all your money in one particular bank account. Please diversify them and then split them up. All right, so that if, let's say, at the end of the day you were to lose some money, right, at least you don't lose everything, your lifelong savings. So this is one very important point. And the other part that I also practice similar to Chikin is my credit card, the one that I always use for online, all those kind of things, right? I have a very, very low credit limit, so that, if I were to lose it, my credit details were to be compromised, right? At least that is the amount of money that I lose. This one is just personal. So I really hope that at the end of the day, if you forget about everything, you at least remember some of these small little things that can protect yourself. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Right. Robert, come say something.
So, actually, what I was going to ask the rest of the panelists was, because, none of them are participating in lucky draws anymore. When was your last online transaction? So I'd actually like to go around the panel, because at the end of the day, what we have to do is balance the risk with the convenience and the fact that you have access to these services. So I mean, whilst we've all been very, very careful about all the risks here, and I think all the risks and all the measures that you can take to reduce the risks are very important to learn. I'm just going around the panel and asking them, Chikin, when was your last online transaction?
This morning, because I've minimized cash contact. So I had to use digital payment for my kopi peng siu dai in the morning.
That's
so
nice, and yeah.
Yeah, so actually it's very common for me now to basically use a digital or an online mechanism.
And I think, Robert, you were saying something about encouraging use of digital payments for hawkers.
Yeah, so actually, I think this is where you start by doing things small, doing things that are familiar. So, Chikin using online payment, using digital payment for a coffee downstairs at a coffee shop that's at your building, it's not foreign. You've just taken one element of a physical transaction and replaced one component. It's the same coffee shop, same guy selling you the coffee.
And it's not 0 to 0.
You, but you just paid for it digitally. But again, going around the rest of the panel, I'm sure, Jamil, when was your last?
Yeah, so mine was actually at lunchtime today. That was through, and it's interesting. We had a question about storing details with third-party apps, but when you actually start to look at how pervasive these are, for convenience, like you said, you need to balance convenience with risk. My details are stored with Deliveroo, so it's a Deliveroo app. I had my lunch delivered, and that was the online transaction for me. But I think one thing we haven't really covered, but it's something that's very straightforward. Even though I had my credit card or my debit card, stored in many of these apps, right? I have requested my bank to notify me immediately upon a transaction. So every time, it's common for me, as soon as I'm process that transaction on an app, I get a text message sent to me that Deliveroo has deducted X amount of dollars from your account. Another way to sort of be informed. So that's another thing that I think we can actually look to do. But I find it incredibly useful, and it gives me a bit more comfort having that those notifications in place.
Okay, well, just down to Eileen and Carolyn because we have to draw this webinar to a close. But yes, thank you, Eileen, Carolyn.
Sorry, the last online transaction that I had.
Yeah, if you would like to humor Robert.
I honestly cannot remember. Probably last week. Yeah, when I brought my son out. Yeah,
Okay,
had to
great.
buy zoo tickets.
Oh, excellent. Eileen?
Okay, I just did it last night because I was checking my bank balance to ensure that they are still there. You know?
So at the end
Before
of the
you
day,
come out and talk about it, right?
so at the end of the day, it's again doing familiar things.
Mhm.
I think the big takeaway is don't go online looking for love, because that can't be bought in the real world, physical world, or online. But I think when you do the real everyday activities that you're familiar with, and just changing one element of it at a time, it's a very safe way to move forward.
Yes, and on that note, we can remind everyone to ask as many questions as you need. Check the checklist in mind to confirm before you proceed with your transaction. And I just want to thank everyone. It's a great exchange and very useful framework, Chikin and Jamil. Robert, thank you for your lucid and concise thoughts. Eileen, wonderful stories about love triangles. And Carolyn, thank you for telling us the why behind everything. Yes, we'll be cognizant of this as we go on. Thank you.